Hi everyone, it's great to be back after a week away. Today we're looking at friendship, so I thought it'd be helpful to look at a story of a couple of friends in the Bible. They're Jonathan and David. But who were Jonathan and David? Well, if you remember back to when we started our series on Proverbs, we looked at a guy called Solomon who asked God for wisdom. Solomon was the third king of Israel. His dad was King David, and David was the second king of Israel. But who was Jonathan? Well, you see, Jonathan was the son of the first king of Israel, King Saul. And this is their story. Saul had been chosen to be king of Israel by God. But after a while, Saul made some bad choices. He disobeyed God and rejected him, so God took his spirit away from Saul and decided to replace Saul as king. But it didn't happen immediately. God chose David to be king in Saul's place, but as he was still too young, Saul remained on the throne for some time. Anyway, because God's spirit was not with Saul anymore, Saul became very angry and he had mad fits of rage. The only thing that would calm him down was music. It just so happened that David was a talented musician and played the lyre and sang. So Saul sent for him, and whenever Saul got into a bad temper, David played for him and calmed him down. Saul kept David close at hand so that he could play whenever he was needed. While he was there, David became close friends with Saul's son, Jonathan. They did everything together and promised to look out for one another because they loved each other like brothers. At that time, Israel was attacked by the Philistines. They had a huge giant of a man called Goliath as their hero. Sadly, I haven't got time to tell you the whole story now, maybe another day. But suffice to say, David defeated Goliath, and the Israelites completely routed the Philistines. That means they defeated all of the Philistines as well. David soon became the hero of Israel, and all the people sang songs about him. They sang, Saul has killed his thousands, but David's killed his tens of thousands. This displeased Saul, and he became scared of David because he knew that God's spirit was with David and not with him. Saul planned to kill David, and one day, when he was in one of his rages, Saul threw a spear at David while he was playing for him. Thankfully, David got out of the way. Saul knew that Jonathan and David had become close friends. So he instructed Jonathan to kill David because he thought that David would be off guard while he was with Jonathan. But instead of killing him, Jonathan told David to be careful because his life was in danger and his dad wanted to kill him. Soon there was a big feast called the New Moon Feast. David was supposed to be attending and sitting with King Saul and Jonathan. But because of their friendship, Jonathan said to David to hide on the first day of the feast, and Jonathan would see if Saul noticed that he was missing and was still angry, or if it was safe for David to come to the feast. When Saul asked Jonathan why David was not there, Jonathan said he'd given permission for David to go and see his family and sacrifice with them at the time of the feast. This made Saul very angry. He ordered Jonathan to send for David so that he could be put to death. When Jonathan questioned why he should be put to death, Saul got even more angry. So Jonathan knew that it wasn't safe for David to return. The next morning, Jonathan went out to the field where David was hiding. He fired an arrow a long way past him. This was their signal for David to flee. David got up from his hiding place and he embraced Jonathan, and they both cried because they knew they would not be able to see each other again. And then David left. Jonathan was a true friend of David's. He stood by him through thick and thin, even if it meant that his own life was at risk. He was not afraid to have those difficult conversations with David, however hard it was, because he loved David like himself. And you know what? We have an even better friend than Jonathan was to David. Jesus calls us his friends, as we'll hear from Martin in a minute. And he loves us so much that he actually did come and die for us so that we could be adopted into his family. Isn't that amazing? Thank you.